Good morning, everyone. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm great. It's so nice to have you back in the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this week is a quiet week.
It is. It makes me wonder what's going on. Maybe there's an event coming up in the very near future.
Maybe. Yeah.
I feel like
Eh,
all the really cool stuff might be coming in, oh, was it 2 weeks? Yeah, it's 2 weeks. COVID fog is real.
COVID fog?
Yeah, COVID fog is real. I forget what day it is. I keep thinking Ignite's next week. It's 2 weeks.
It's
So,
in 2 weeks. It's in 2 weeks, yes. And yeah, because normally at this time I'd be starting to pack.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
And because we always used to get there a few days before the event so we could like set up and do our thing and do the rehearsals and do everything. And now it's just for the last what three virtual ones we've had so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
I mean, I this is what I hope. I hope we all get through this with much more appreciation for the things that we've been able to work toward together, right? I'm looking forward to the day where we can see each other face to face because I've never met you face to face. So hopefully someday, right?
yeah. Hopefully someday. Uh, One of the things I find is, and we went completely virtual. Now the pendulum will be swinging back at some point when we are all a little safer and vaccinated and everything else. Um, but I don't think the virtual part is ever going to go away.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think if anything, we've shown that we can run these events virtually. So I wonder if there's always going to be some sort of element of that each time, right?
Yes, and especially for something like Ignite, where like okay, we get like 30,000 people into Orlando or wherever we decide to fit that many people, and we get together. That's 30,000. But how many other thousands? Like what was last year? 270,000 people online.
Right, right. Think about being able to reach that audience.
Reach that audience, but also it's not like every company can afford the I don't know, like $4,000 or $5,000 that it would cost for putting you on a plane and sending you to Orlando for a week so that you can hang out at Ignite and learn a bunch of things when you can do a lot of it online. So
Yeah.
I think it will address, and it's almost like it renders it more accessible to a wider range of people,
Yeah.
whether or not it's in person or 100% virtual.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this continues to evolve, right?
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I feel like there's always going to be some sort of element of this in the future. How much it plays a part, I guess it remains to be seen, but I feel like it's going to be a big possibility in the future to have some sort of hybrid component where you've got folks being able to attend different sessions and events virtually.
Yeah. And if we were in person, we wouldn't have to say hello to like Andrew McCallum and Jared Shockley and Rabbit Jr. and who else is there? Uh Andrew. Oh, I already said Andrew. Although those are the ones that are actually signed in to our chat room, and they've been. Oh, and there's some Facebook users. That's the thing with the platform that we're using right now. The chat comes up, it just says Facebook user. It
I
doesn't
know, I
actually
saw
show
that.
the name.
I saw that. I was like, that's interesting. Are they anonymous? I didn't realize that was a limitation.
No, it's mostly because like the Facebook, they're trying to tighten their privacy things. So you have to actually physically go in and say I allow StreamYard to display my name.
Aha. Okay. Okay.
But yeah, if we were all in person, we wouldn't have started the AZ update. We wouldn't have this weekly touch point with our audience, and this would be fun. This wouldn't be as fun. I mean,
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
okay. Um, should we get to the news or
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do the news.
the little piece of news that we have? Because again, it's been a slow week.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like the AZ update in a couple of weeks is gonna be much bigger and more to cover, right? So
Yes. Well, I'm hoping. I'm hoping. So, all right. So, why don't you take it up?
sure. So this week there's a public preview that wound up getting launched for Visual Studio Code on the web. So if you think about this, we've offered up a number of different ways to access things quicker, faster, all of the above, right? I feel
Mhm.
like this follows suit. So you can access local files, you can add certain components to existing files. The one thing is you can't troubleshoot, debug, etc., but you can always upgrade to GitHub code spaces. You get more VS Code like scenarios inside the web. But I just feel like we're trying to find all these different unique ways of giving folks access to their coding environment. And that's not just developers, right? I mean, we were just joking about this prior to the show kicking off today. I feel like an infrastructure dev some days. I'm like, wow, I've never seen that error message. I can't believe I'm coding things. I can't believe I'm not having an anxiety attack. So I feel like this is trying to meet a bunch of different types of folks where they are, and it's just a faster, quicker way without having to fire up Visual Studio Code to access. Like, let's say you to change one line of code, you could probably do that pretty quickly and get something sent over to whomever needed to see it. You could probably even upgrade it and get the GitHub code spaces, and you get more functionality, right? So it's
Yep.
a really neat feature, and I like to see the fact that we're thinking about all these unique ways that folks could access their coding environment.
Yeah. And I love, like, Visual Studio Code is my go-to editor for everything. For my PowerShell scripts, for my bicep files, deployment scripts, my ARM templates, whatever I write, when it's code, it's always in Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
I used to install Visual Studio, but then I started thinking, why am I installing a 4 terabyte product to edit a 17K file?
Yeah, I know it's a lot of overkill for the work that we tend to do.
Yeah,
Did you know there is a PowerShell ISE? Like, what do they call that now? It's do
a
they still call
theme.
it a theme? Yeah. So I added it to mine recently, and it feels like the ISE of old. I'm like, oh, there
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, the same
So
colors and
yeah,
everything. Yeah,
I got called out with a buddy of mine who told me that I was too much of a nerd, and I'm like, you know what? There's something calming about seeing those colors, right?
yep. And, I want to take you to task on one thing. Well, not really take you to task. You were talking about, you felt like a IT pro dev, and I've had that discussion with many people. And April and I don't agree on this particular point. Where her mind is that because we write code, that we're all developers, and I'm like, no. So if you tell a developer that they're an operations folks because they make a backup of their database, how are they going to feel?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think infrastructure dev is pretty appropriate for software defined everything, right?
Yeah,
We're hitting the
but
same.
I still think we are operations and an IT pro. I wouldn't characterize us as devs,
Right,
even
right.
though we
Which is
use
why,
dev tools.
well, right, which is why I always preface it with infrastructure dev, right? Because
Okay.
we know how to stand up a VM, an availability set, a load balancer in front of everything. We know how to kind of programmatically put that into a template. And then boom, we didn't have to go in and click through the portal and build it that way, right? So that's why I make the joke that I feel like an infrastructure dev. I'm not
Okay.
a true dev. I'm not building .NET apps or Java apps. I have played around with it, but I don't know. I've got a lot more appreciation these days for my developer friends. I used to hate them. I don't hate them anymore. I've got loads of sympathy.
I've never hated them.
So it's a little strong, but there was a
Yeah.
lot of there was a lot of like fighting over the years.
Yes, it's like siblings. Like, there's that
Very much.
rivalry,
Yeah.
and
I like that.
but I do have to admit that after a while, using some of the tools that have been traditionally built and marketed to developers in an ops environment, especially like Visual Studio Code. You mentioned GitHub code space, but GitHub itself, like, some of those are inherently developer focused tools. But man, have they ever saved my butt in so many ways in the past that I don't understand why more operations folks are not leveraging the power that some of those tools can bring them, like Visual Studio Code with the integrated PowerShell and Linux terminals, with the way you can just basically write your code block and like run it, which you can do in the ISE, but the ISE, you have to be sitting at a Windows machine
Yes.
And you can't switch in the ISC. You can't like run a bash script.
No, you can't. You're right. No, and there's a lot more flexibility in the D tool itself. You can run it on a number of different OSs as well, right? Linux, Mac. You could run on a server if you wanted to, right? There's a lot of interesting ways to think about, I guess, coding your environment and enabling certain levels of where to store the code and how to sort of programmatically put it all together.
Yeah, there's only a couple of things though. When I read and when I dove into that subject a bit more, I realized that there's a few drawbacks though to the web versus the full VS Code, which full VS Code is not very big either. But extensions are different. So you have web extensions versus the traditional extensions. So not all the extensions that you're using, let's say for autocomplete and IntelliSense and stuff like that, for let's say writing a bicep file, when you're trying to add that extension to it so that it would have that information, it won't work because it requires that web extension.
Yes, right.
There's no terminal because there's no compute power in a web sandbox.
Right. Yeah, so I think of it more like this. Like if you're traveling maybe and you get bugged about something, you could probably log in there much quicker than you could firing up a laptop, because I think you can get on there via like a tablet, right? I mean, there's so many ways of thinking about it. But if you just needed to make some quick tweaks, maybe you weren't very heavy with it, you just needed to adjust a couple of files or edit a couple of files, it's a quick win without having to fire up the app. Not that the app takes a lot of resources, it's just one less thing you have to, because you're usually in a browser, right? Like you usually have a browser window open. It might be a faster way to think about, updating certain code files.
Yeah, and now that it's that, I'm wondering if they're going to update, because there's been for a long time like this code-like experience in the Azure shell.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to get ported at some time. And this is not news, folks out there.
This is just us wondering, right? That would be an interesting proposition. So I guess if the PG is listening or are listening, there's multiple people, right? That would be a really cool feature. And I'm sure you'd have a lot of customers who would be excited about that.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, like Jared, he says, I have used the web version on his iPad.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Oh.
See, I thought you could use it. I have yet to get my iPad. I've got to figure out. It's giving me some error messages. I've got to troubleshoot that this weekend. So I've not yet tried it.
My iPad, I think, I don't even know if it'll turn on, because it's been on the corner. It's been on the corner of the desk way over there for a long, long, long time. I can't even remember the last time I turned it on. It's the model from 2013, so
it's not that, it's old, but it's not that old. I know people who still have models from like 2009, 2010 era.
Yeah, which is a kind of nice.
It's almost a paperweight at this point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next item, which again we had to kind of dig deep into the bowels of our newsfeed to find something relevant for our audience.
I know it was a light week.
It's a very light week. So Azure HCI or Azure Stack HCI, the way it's built that it regularly gets new feature. It's like Azure in effect that you deploy it on your metal, or you buy an OEM solution that supports Azure Stack HCI, and then more and more capabilities get dropped in on a regular basis. Typically, it's like there's a monthly release. For this month's release, there's been some significant improvement that I wanted to cover. So the number one is the use of GPUs with clustered VM. It's something that we've done in Azure, and now it's kind of trickled to Azure Stack HCI. The big one, in my opinion, is going to be the dynamic CPU compatibility mode. So that's been enabled, that's been lit up. And even last time I was talking with Jeff Woolsey, he was very excited about this. Is in the old model, it would take, if you had multiple, and it's all within families, so it's like all Intels or all AMDs. You can't mix and match architecture. But if let's say let's for sake of arguments, let's stick we're on Intel, and you have different families of Intel CPUs that may have different capabilities and feature set. Normally, the compatibility mode would basically dumb it down to the absolute lowest common denominator and would run your VM as such. So you would, if you had invested in those nodes in your farm that would have these like really beefy and capable CPUs, you wouldn't be taking advantage of them because it'd be dumbed down to the lowest common denominator. Now, the processor compatibility mode has been updated to take advantage of those new capabilities. So it will actually give you a lot more of those capabilities, even across the similar CPUs in your HCI cluster. So to me, that is going to be really, really cool. And that's going to bring a lot of benefits to our users, especially when in a world where you can scale. So you start with the 2 node, and then all of a sudden you don't have enough. You add a third, but in between the second and the third, maybe there's a new gen of Intel chips that came out or AMD chips that came out. So I think just that, especially since like you get that, you don't have to reinstall or anything. You just run your Windows update, and all of a sudden your compatibility list, your compatibility mode changes. I think it's great.
Yeah, very cool.
There's of course there's others like storage thin provisioning, adjustable storage repair speed, nested virtualization on AMD processor. So we had that in Azure. Now again, it's trickled to HCI. And another big one is going to be the quick restarts, or what they call the kernel soft reboot.
Huh.
So that's now coming down to on-prem. That's very cool, especially when you're looking at rebooting a machine. Sometimes can take upwards in like 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you've got huge amounts of memory on those servers, like the shutdown where it actually purges and then drains the memory, writes everything down, and reboots the machine and then reloads everything. That could be even more, like 5-10 minutes. Now with the kernel soft reboot, this will be in like sub 1 minute kind of time frame to reboot your server. So it makes things a little bit more feasible in terms of if you have a very short maintenance windows and you have to upgrade and patch your clusters, your clustered nodes, and you have got, I don't know, 10 of them. You can do it fairly quickly because you deploy, but you reboot them in sequence. So very cool. Oh, I'm looking at the chat to see if anything can show. Jared says that his team is building out a large Azure Stack HCI clusters, and he can't wait to put his hands on them. So actually, maybe we could ask him at the time whether or not he can come out and tell us about it. But that was it for the news.
Yeah.
It's pretty thin.
I feel like we're waiting for Ignite. So I think, we'll probably have a very light week next week too.
Yeah.
And then
However,
the week of Ignite will be busy, right?
One thing that is ramping up is events.
Yeah.
And you've got a couple to tell us about.
I do.
So the first one, tell us about the first one.
So Shabazz got a hold of me. I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. Actually, maybe it was even longer. I think it was longer, but I was busy and we had to kind of push it down a bit. He came up with this whole notion of the Azure VMware solution 0 to hero. He wanted to build something very similar to what he had done with when it was WVD. Now it's AVD. And he wanted to do something similar for Azure VMware solution. And so our first video launched. We'll be launching new videos once a week. So we'll have a blog post show up on IT Ops Talk. It'll tie you to where that video exists. And, we'll talk about what is Azure VMware solution, what you have to think about in terms of planning and prereqs, how you deploy it. There's a video involved with that because the deployment process it's not a fast process. It takes about 4-ish hours to build the full cluster. And that's all of the vSphere components, including vCenter, vSAN, and NSXT. And then it kind of walks you through some of the integrations as well, which is really cool.
It's still kind of quicker than I remember doing it in real life, though.
Right, it used to take months when you'd have to build out a brand new vSphere environment, right?
Yeah,
I
so,
did plot in a handful of months, and you had to change windows galore, so yeah. But yeah, so hopefully folks find this exciting, and Shabazz would love it if I said, smash the like button, because that's the thing everybody's saying now on YouTube. So smash the like button. Definitely subscribe to his channel, because he's doing a lot these days. He's a newer MVP as well, and he's hopeful that these types of things are helpful to the broader community. So that's kind of the first, I guess, thing we're going to talk about.
the first thing we're going to talk about, yep. The second thing is
Azure IaaS Day, which sounds really interesting. So
yes.
I wound up getting put on an email thread, and I found out about this. And so I've been kind of getting it out to the broader world here. But I think because Ignite has been so targeted, and it's only over like a couple of days versus 5 days, different product teams and different groups are doing these specific day-long events.
Yeah.
And Azure IaaS Day is no different, right? It'll talk about all the new enhancements in storage, networking, and compute, walk through some demos. I do believe it's going to be set up in a way where folks could ask questions, and there'll be moderators in the chat that can answer. So it should be really good. You'll be able to get a feel for some of the new stuff that's coming. And it happens after Ignite. So in theory, you should see all of the new Ignite stuff show up there as well. But outside of that, I don't know too much, except for the fact that I have already registered. So you should definitely register and join us as we, I guess, go down this path of walking through all the new infrastructure as a service features.
Yeah, I haven't registered yet. Actually, to be completely honest, I didn't even know about it until you popped it up on our list of things to talk about this morning. And
Surprise!
last night I was looking at it and go, "Wow, this is gonna be cool." Oh, November 17th. But luckily, because it's a IaaS Day, like a webcast, if you register and you can't make that day, which is going to be my case, I have a personal business that day that I cannot miss. You'll be able to like get back to the site using the same kind of address and registration links that you will get after you register, and see it on demand, which is what
Right.
I'm planning on doing.
Right.
I do the same. I did the same with the Windows Server Summit, what, a month ago?
Yeah. I think, yeah. God, was it a month ago? I think you're right. Yeah, it was about. I did the same thing. I didn't catch everything, but I caught the stuff I wanted to catch on demand.
Yeah, and I find the more we can, as a community, get together and learn and share. And I like the fact that there's going to be like a chat, and you can ask questions. And of course, you can always go to our Discord server and continue the discussion, or ask the questions there as well. If we don't have a community member that is knowledgeable that will answer your questions, because lately this seems to be people answer their own questions. So we're just kind of like there watching it and waving at people as they're. And which is kind of,
that's when you've succeeded, right? Like when people come to the community, they ask questions and another community member answers. That's when you've succeeded at establishing a community, right?
yeah. It's I find that when we get to that point, that critical mass, if you will, I think we've done a good job. But keep in mind, we are going to have a Microsoft Ignite 2021 or Fall 2021. I don't even know what we're calling it this time. In the Discord, we're going to have a channel so that we could do keynote commenting, and I'm sure Jared will put a few dad jokes in there or memes. And we'll have our back channel conversations during Ignite is going to happen again on the IT Upstock Discord.
Sweet.
All right, cool. That next one.
So this one, it might be interesting to know about. I don't know if it's going to be something that everybody would want to go to, but there is a modernize your apps and data with Azure and Power Apps. And so now that citizen developers are becoming more and more prevalent, and it's kind of falling into the world of IT pros as well, it might be interesting to go and sit in on this, right? And again, if you can't go the day it's being broadcast, which if I look at that, it's next Thursday. Thursday doesn't work for you. You could always watch it on demand, right? You can kind of pick and choose what you want to watch and maybe fast forward the parts that don't make a ton of sense, because there is going to be some developer components in there. There'll be some .NET and Java, but maybe you're one of those people that sort of evolved your skill set into this role where you kind of sit in between developer and infrastructure, right? So maybe you're a middleware person, and this might be interesting for you to sort of know how to speed up that digital transformation process for you and your team. So it might be interesting to just register and see what's out there. But it'll be very similar to the IS Day in the sense that it will be targeted sessions talking about some of the new enhancements, some demos. You'll be able to ask questions in the chat. There will be folks moderating the chat as well.
I actually signed up for that one, and I'll tell you why. As we discussed earlier, I am a ops and IT pro, but as I mentioned, I've been also using a ton of developer tools and processes to make my ops life better.
Yes.
So I've got a lot of, and I've talked about these before, like logic apps and Azure functions that are written in a way to enhance or support the operations of the environments that I work with. Now I'm at the point where I'm trying to think, is there something in Power Apps that can help in terms of like Power Automate or even if it's just a form that needs to be written and the information processed in the very specific way whenever you do a change to a server or you access a certain part. Like I'm trying to rack my brain to see where those pieces can fit to help ops. And that's why I'm interested. And that's why I signed up, because I want to check it out.
Very cool. Yeah, same. I'm always open to figuring out how can I make my life better, faster, more streamlined. And it's usually with code, which if you told me this like 10 to 15 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you that I would be building things with code, right? And it's gonna be interesting to see what winds up happening too, what they showcase, because it might kind of get you excited about going down a path and maybe building out some future content for folks to absorb, especially because you and I are very similar in the sense that our community base is predominantly IT pros.
Yep.
So if there's anything we can do to sort of demystify that process, we're always excited to go down this rabbit hole and figure out where all the dead bodies are. I should be nicer about that. But you got to kind of figure out all of the stuff, right? And you can kind of document that as well. Like, hey, I ran into this obstacle. This is how I got past it. Hey, I talked to a dev friend. I didn't know what the heck this error message meant. Now I do. This is what it means. I think everybody's always looking for that translator. And I feel like that's our role for the community, right? We translate a lot of these harder to understand concepts and make them so that like a 6-year-old could understand it, right?
Yes. And I'm looking forward to learning more about stuff like that.
Yes. Very
okay.
Cool.
So that being said, considering that you and I are like on the same page,
we are.
The next little piece, or our learn module of the week, is.
Yeah, you need like a sound effect for that.
I know I should put one on my soundboard, but I didn't. Introduction to Git.
Yeah. So I always think of this as we're sitting in a world that's very software defined now. We're not racking and stacking servers anymore. We're not dealing with switches or routers or firewalls or anything like that.
Well, some, but not all the time.
Well, yeah, I guess that is true. We're not doing it the way that we were 10 to 15 to 20 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is an opportunity to take folks that are in the IT pro realm and walk them through source control so they understand that there are ways to capture your scripts. It doesn't have to be an ARM template. It doesn't have to be a bicep template. It doesn't have to be a Terraform template. It could just be a number of maybe bash scripts or PowerShell scripts you run in your environment. You could commit that into source control so it's not living in a utility server. You'd have to go browse to that server. It's a way to think about getting code distributed a little bit better than a centralized spot because it's decentralized, right? And so get you comfortable with the commands, right? You can always use the interface. The interface, I don't think will ever go away, the GUI interface.
I don't think I've ever installed GitHub Desktop. Yeah,
so it's not terrible, but for me, I always learned the Git commands. And so it was a little hard. It's weird because it's weird to even say that out loud because normally I'd be like, GUI, yes, let's go down that path. But I learned Git via the command line. And this just takes you through, what version control is, kind of some of the basic commands, how to commit things to a local GitHub environment, or not a local, it's like a local Git environment,
Yeah.
and then kind of dealing with the version control. It's really cool stuff.
Anyway, we are out of time. I'm getting the hook from Learn TV, so we're gonna have to say goodbye. So for those of you in the chat, thank you very much for spending the last half hour with us. Shannon, it was wonderful again to have you.
So much fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.